Daniel Thorne stepped onto his porch Christmas morning, reaching for firewood. His breath hung white in the frozen air. Then he sawed a wicker basket in fresh snow, steam rising from beneath a wool blanket. He crossed the porch in 3 strides, pulled back the blanket. A newborn girl lay inside. Her lips were blue, her skin mottled gray and white like creek ice. One tiny fist clutched at nothing. She wasn't crying, wasn't moving much at all. God Almighty, Daniel whispered. A scrap of paper was tucked beneath her. His hands shook as he read, "Her name is Hope. I can't keep her. You're a good father." The cabin door banged open behind him. Daddy, 7-year-old Emma appeared in her nightshirt, eyes still sleepy. Then she saw the basket. "Daddy, baby!" 5-year-old Thomas pushed past her. 2-year-old Jacob toddled out last, barefoot on the cold boards. "Inside," Daniel said. "All of you, inside now." He lifted the basket. The baby was lighter than kindling. He could feel how cold she was even through the blanket. Her breathing came shallow and slow. Emma held the door. Thomas stared wide-eyed. Jacob pointed. "Baby," he said. "Baby cold." Daniel carried the basket to the hearth, laid it on the warm stones. The fire had burned low overnight. He built it up fast, hands fumbling with bark and tinder. His children pressed close, silent now, sensing the gravity. The baby's eyes were closed. Her chest barely moved. "She's dying," Emma said quietly. Daniel's throat tightened. He had 3 children already. 3 mouths to feed, 3 bodies to clothe, 3 hearts that depended on him alone. Sarah had been gone 2 years now. 2 years of barely holding together, barely keeping his head above water. He couldn't take on another child. Couldn't. But the note's words burned in his mind. "You're a good father." "Thomas, stoke the fire. Emma, get every blanket we have. Jacob, you stay back from the hearth." His voice came out steadier than he felt. He unwrapped the baby carefully. Her skin was so cold it frightened him. Movement caught his eye through the window. A figure crossing the snow between his cabin and the neighboring one, Catherine Hayes. Moving fast. A bag in her hands. She must have seen him on the porch. Must have known something was wrong. The door opened without a knock. Catherine swept in, already shedding her coat. Her eyes went straight to the basket. "How long has she been out there?" She knelt beside the hearth, hands already reaching. "I don't know. I just found her." Catherine picked up the baby, felt her neck, her chest, pressed her ear to the tiny ribcage. Her face was grim. "She's hypothermic. Badly." Catherine looked up at him. "I need warm water. Not hot warm. And more blankets. Move." "Daniel." He moved. Catherine worked without speaking. Her hands moved with the precision of someone who'd tended the sick before. She stripped the baby's frozen clothes, wrapped her in a blanket warmed by the fire, tested the water Daniel brought with her elbow before dampening a cloth. Daniel's children watched from across the room. Emma had her arms around Thomas. Jacob sat in her lap, thumb in his mouth. They'd seen their mother die. They understood when life hung in the balance. Catherine worked the warm cloth over the baby's skin, slowly, methodically, checking the color, the breathing, the tiny pulse at the throat. An hour passed, then another. The baby's lips began to lose their blue tint. Pink crept back into her cheeks. Her breathing deepened. Then she cried. The sound was thin and reedy, but it filled the cabin like a bell. Emma gasped. Thomas grinned. Jacob clapped his hands. Catherine's shoulders sagged with relief. She looked up at Daniel, and he saw exhaustion in her eyes. And something else, something fierce and protective. "She'll live," Catherine said. "But she needs constant care. Every 2 hours feeding, warming, checking. Do you understand what that means?" Daniel looked at his 3 children, looked at the tiny baby in Catherine's arms. He was already exhausted, already stretched thinner than worn rope. This would break him. But the note sat on the mantel. "You're a good father." "I understand," he said. Catherine's expression softened. "I'll help. Until the sheriff finds her mother? Just until then?" They both knew it was a lie. Nobody left a baby in the snow on Christmas morning unless they were desperate, or gone for good. Bootsteps sounded on the porch. Sheriff Garrett knocked once and entered. He was a weathered man, gray-bearded, with eyes that had seen too much. "Heard you found something this morning," he said. Daniel handed him the note. Garrett read it twice. Looked at the baby. Looked at Daniel. "Any idea who left her?" "No." "Anyone see anything unusual last night?" "We were all asleep." Garrett folded the note carefully. "I'll ask around, but Daniel—" He paused. "It's Christmas morning. It's 10 below. Whoever left this baby made a choice. They knew she wouldn't survive long. They were trusting you specifically. How do you know that? Because they left her on your porch. Not mine. Not the preacher's. Yours." Garrett settled his hat back on. "I'll do what I can. But don't expect much." After he left, silence filled the cabin. Catherine sat in Sarah's old rocking chair, the baby cradled against her. The chair creaked softly as she rocked. Emma approached slowly. "What's her name?" "Hope." Daniel said, "Her name is Hope, like in church." Thomas said, "Hope means something good is coming." Catherine looked down at the sleeping infant. "Yes," she said quietly, "something good." But her eyes were sad when she said it. Daniel wondered what she was thinking. Wondered why a woman with no children of her own lived alone in a cabin, helping everyone else raise theirs. "I'll stay tonight," Catherine said. "She'll need watching." Daniel wanted to refuse. Wanted to say he could manage. But he looked at Hope's tiny face and knew he couldn't. "Thank you," he said instead. Catherine settled deeper into the rocker. The firelight caught her profile, strong nose, firm jaw, dark hair pulled back simple. She wasn't a young woman anymore. Neither was he a young man. They were both survivors of harder years. "Just until we find her mother," Catherine repeated, outside. Snow began to fall again, soft and steady. Covering tracks, covering everything. 3 days became a week. Catherine came at dawn and stayed past dark. Then she began staying through the night, sleeping in Sarah's rocker with Hope in her arms. Daniel would wake in the early hours and see her there, silhouetted by firelight, gently rocking. The children attached to her like burrs. Emma followed her everywhere, asking questions, learning how to change cloth diapers and warm milk. Thomas brought her his treasures, a smooth river stone, a carved horse, a bird's nest. He'd lay them in her lap without speaking, offerings from a quiet heart. Jacob was bolder. He'd climb into her lap beside Hope, pat the baby's head gently, and announce calf-win baby with absolute certainty. Daniel watched it all and felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been frozen since Sarah died. He'd loved his wife deeply, truly. She'd been light and laughter, quick to sing, quick to forgive. When she died birthing Jacob, something in Daniel had shut down. He'd locked the grief away, focused only on keeping his children alive and warm and fed. He'd locked away more than grief. He'd locked away hope itself. Now Catherine moved through his cabin with quiet competence, and he couldn't help but see how Emma's eyes followed her, see how Thomas smiled more, see how Jacob laughed again, see how Hope thrived in her arms. One evening after the children slept, Daniel found himself standing outside Sarah's old sewing room. He'd locked it after she died. Couldn't bear to see the half-finished quilts, the tiny clothes she'd sewn for the baby she'd never hold. He opened the door. Moonlight fell through the window onto the cradle he'd made. Oak and walnut, fitted together with care. He'd carved a star into the headboard. Sarah had chosen the design. Daniel lifted the cradle, carried it to the main room, set it beside the fire. Catherine looked up from the rocker. Her eyes went to the cradle, then to Daniel's face. It was Sarah's, he said. For Jacob, but she never... His voice caught. Catherine nodded. She understood. She always seemed to understand. She rose carefully, Hope sleeping against her shoulder, lowered the baby into the cradle with infinite gentleness. Hope settled with a small sigh, one fist curling against her cheek. Daniel watched Catherine's face, saw tenderness there, saw longing. You never had children, he said. It wasn't a question. No. Catherine's voice was soft. My husband and I tried. Then he died. Riding accident. 3 years ago. After that, the doctor said, she stopped. It doesn't matter now. I'm sorry. So am I. She looked at Hope. I thought my chance was gone. Then this. Daniel wanted to say something. Wanted to tell her that she was good with his children, that they needed her, that maybe he needed her too. But the words stuck in his throat. Loving again meant risking again, meant opening himself to the possibility of more loss. He wasn't sure he was strong enough for that. Catherine seemed to sense his struggle. She moved past him, heading for the door. I should go back to my cabin tonight. You'll be fine now. You know what to do. Catherine. She paused, hand on the latch. Thank you, he said, for everything. She nodded, stepped out into the snow. Daniel watched through the window as she crossed to her own cabin, watched until her lamp lit in the darkness. Then he turned back to the cradle. Hope slept peacefully. Her color was good, her breathing steady. She'd survived because Catherine had saved her. Maybe they were all surviving because of Catherine. Daniel sank into the rocker. It still held her warmth. The thought disturbed him, comforted him, both at once. Outside, the snow fell soft and steady. Inside, the fire burned low. And in the cradle that Sarah had never used, a baby named Hope slept sound and safe. The door he'd kept closed for 2 years was opening. Whether he was ready or not, January brought bitter cold. Catherine didn't go back to her cabin. She slept in the rocker at first, then finally accepted Daniel's offer of the sewing room. The small bed there had been Sarah's when she needed quiet in her pregnancy. Now it was Catherine's. The household found a rhythm. Catherine rose before dawn, stirred the fire, warmed milk for Hope. Daniel handled the trap line and wood cutting. Emma helped with cooking and laundry. Thomas fetched water and fed the chickens. Even Jacob had his tasks gathering kindling, folding cloths. They moved around each other like parts of a well-made machine. Efficient, careful, but something hummed beneath the surface. Something unspoken. Daniel would reach for the coffee pot and find Catherine already pouring his cup. She'd turn to check on the children and discover he'd already settled Jacob for his nap. Their hands would brush passing plates at dinner. Their eyes would meet across the fire at night. Neither acknowledged it. Both felt it. The community noticed. On Sunday, the preacher's wife brought a casserole, her sharp eyes taking in Catherine's presence, the smoothly running household, the children's easy affection. Mighty convenient, Mrs. Carson said. That baby arriving right when you needed help. Catherine's back stiffened. The baby nearly died. Vera, there was nothing convenient about it. Of course, of course. Mrs. Carson's smile didn't reach her eyes. I only meant it's fortunate Daniel had you nearby, a lone man with 3 children, and now 4. People do wonder. After she left, Catherine was quiet. She scrubbed the already clean table harder than necessary. Don't listen to her, Daniel said. She's not wrong. People are talking. Let them talk. Daniel. Catherine faced him. I should move back to my cabin, come during the day to help. But, no. The word came out sharper than he intended. His children looked up from their play. He lowered his voice. You're needed here. Hope needs you. Hope needs a mother, Catherine said softly. Not a neighbor who helps. The distinction cut deeper than it should. Daniel had no answer. That evening after the children slept, he sat by the fire whittling, working a piece of pine into something, though he wasn't sure what. His hands needed occupation. His mind was too restless. Catherine sat across from him, mending a shirt. The domesticity of it struck him, her stitching, him carving, the fire between them, like a real family, like a marriage. The knife slipped. He cursed softly as blood welled from his thumb. Catherine was beside him instantly. She took his hand, wrapped it in a clean cloth, applied pressure. Her touch was gentle but firm. You're shaking, she said. I'm tired. You're afraid. He looked up, met her eyes. She was too close, too perceptive. Of what? He asked. The same thing I am. Their faces were inches apart. He could feel her breath, see the firelight reflected in her eyes. His free hand came up almost of its own accord, touching her cheek. Then Hope cried from the cradle. Catherine pulled back, rose, went to the baby. Daniel watched her lift Hope, soothe her, settle back into the rocker. The moment had passed, but it had happened. They both knew it. Catherine wouldn't meet his eyes the rest of the evening, when she finally retired to the sewing room. Daniel sat alone by the dying fire. His thumb throbbed where he'd cut it. The cloth Catherine had wrapped around it was her handkerchief. He could see her initials embroidered in the corner. C.H. Catherine Hayes, not C.T., not Catherine Thorne. Yet, the thought rose unbidden, terrifying, exhilarating. He was falling in love with her. Had been for weeks. Maybe since Christmas morning when she'd crossed the snow to save a dying baby. Maybe longer, since some moment he hadn't even noticed at the time. And she felt it too. He'd seen it in her eyes tonight, felt it in the trembling of her hand on his. But neither of them had spoken. Neither had dared. Because love meant risk. Love meant vulnerability. Love meant you could lose everything again. Daniel poured water on the fire, checked on his children, Emma in her bed, Thomas in his, Jacob in the small cot, all sleeping peacefully, all warm and safe. He stood in the doorway of the sewing room. Catherine's lamp was out. He heard the rustle of bedclothes, knew she was awake, listening, waiting. Good night, Catherine, he said softly. A pause. Then, good night, Daniel. He went to his own cold bed alone, lay awake in the darkness, felt the house breathe around him, children sleeping, Catherine nearby, Hope safe in her cradle, his family, not by blood, not by law, but by something stronger. If only he had the courage to claim it. February brought a brief thaw. Ice dripped from the eaves, snow turned to slush in the yard. After 6 weeks of bitter cold, the warmth felt like permission. The children need air, Catherine said at breakfast. We all do. Daniel looked at his 4 children, 3 boisterous, 1 tiny, and nodded. Town's not far. We need supplies anyway. They bundled everyone in coats and scarves. Catherine fashioned a sling for Hope, wore the baby against her chest. Emma held Thomas's hand. Daniel carried Jacob on his shoulders. They looked like a family. Daniel realized it as they walked. Realized how they must appear to anyone watching. Man. Woman. 4 children. Complete. The thought should have frightened him. Instead, it felt right. Town was busy despite the mud. People called greetings. Mrs. Jameson from the general store cooed over Hope. The blacksmith tipped his hat to Catherine. Everyone was friendly, curious, knowing. Then Sheriff Garrett appeared, leading his horse. He nodded to Catherine, addressed Daniel. It's been 6 weeks now. No word on the mother. Nobody's come forward. Nobody's asking questions. He glanced at Hope, sleeping peacefully in the sling. Might be time to talk to the circuit judge about permanent arrangements. The word permanent landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading. When's the judge due? Daniel asked. Spring, April, maybe May. Garrett's eyes were kind. Give you time to figure things out. After he left, Catherine was quiet. She purchased their supplies mechanically, spoke only when necessary. On the walk home, Thomas ran ahead, chasing a robin. Emma walked beside Daniel, chattering about the coming spring. Jacob dozed on Daniel's shoulders. Catherine lagged behind. Daniel slowed until they walked together. What are you thinking? When the judge comes, Hope will need a proper family, a mother and father. Catherine's voice was carefully neutral. I can help you find someone suitable. Daniel stopped walking. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm not her mother. I'm just helping. My children don't know that. Catherine looked down at Hope, sleeping against her chest. They should, before they get confused. Confused about what? About who I am, about what this is. She gestured vaguely at the space between them. I'm a neighbor helping in a crisis. When the crisis ends, I go home. Emma turned back, watching them. Thomas had stopped running. Even in the moment's stillness, they sensed something important happening. And when does the crisis end? Daniel asked quietly. Catherine had no answer. They walked the rest of the way in silence. But that night, after the children were asleep, Catherine tried to leave again. I need to go back to my cabin, she said, standing at the door with her coat. Why, Dora? Because I'm confused. Because your children are confused. Because... Her voice broke. Because I can't keep pretending. Pretending what? That these are my children. That Hope is mine. That this is my family. Tears slipped down her face. I can't have children. Daniel. The doctor told me after Marcus died. Something about the grief. The shock my body won't carry a child. So I can't stand here and pretend that these 4 belong to me. I can't. Daniel crossed the room, knelt before her chair, took her hands. What if they did belong to you? What if Hope was yours? What if all of this was real? She shook her head. It can't be. Why not? Because I'm broken. So am I. He looked up at her, saw the anguish in her eyes, saw the longing beneath it. I failed Sarah, he said. I couldn't save her. And after she died, I shut everything down, became half a man, just going through motions, keeping everyone alive but not really living. His grip tightened on her hands. Then you came, and you brought us back to life. Not just Hope, all of us. Me. Daniel, I love you. Catherine, I think I've loved you since Christmas morning. I know I'm not. I know I can't promise I'll never fail again. But I'm asking. His voice roughened. What if you stayed not as a neighbor, not as help, as my wife, as their mother? Catherine's tears fell on their joined hands. I can't be Sarah. I'm not asking you to be Sarah. I'm asking you to be Catherine, and let me be more than just surviving. She touched his face. Her palm was warm against his cheek. I'm afraid, she whispered. So am I. Outside. The thaw continued. Ice breaking, water running, spring working beneath winter's surface. Inside, 2 broken people held on to each other and hoped it was enough. March came cold and hard. The brief thaw proved false. Winter returned with fury, wind that cut like knives, snow that buried the fences. Catherine stayed. They didn't speak again about what Daniel had said, but she stayed. Slept in the sewing room. Cared for the children. Held hope. Looked at Daniel across the dinner table with eyes that said everything words couldn't. It was enough. For now. Then on a gray afternoon, when sleet hammered the windows and the children played inside, someone knocked. Daniel opened the door to a young woman, 20 years old, maybe thin as a fence rail, dark circles under her eyes. She wore a coat too light for the weather, carried nothing but a small bag. "I'm Ruth Anderson," she said. Her voice shook. "I'm Hope's mother. I've come to take her back." The world tilted. Emma screamed, "No!" from across the room. Thomas ran to the cradle, stood in front of it like a small guard. Jacob began to cry. Catherine went white as snow, backing away, one hand pressed to her mouth. Daniel couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't think past the roaring in his ears. Ruth stepped inside, snow melting on her shoulders. "I'm sorry. I know this is... I'm sorry. You left her to die," Catherine said. Her voice came from somewhere far away and terrible. Ruth flinched. "I left her with a good man. I knew I saw you in town once, with your children. You were patient with them. Kind. I thought if anyone could..." She started crying. "I was starving. My husband died of fever on the trail west. I gave birth alone. I had nothing. She would have died with me for certain. I gave her a chance. By leaving her in the snow," Catherine's voice rose. "She was blue when we found her. She nearly..." "Catherine!" Daniel found his voice, found movement. He put a hand on her arm. She was shaking. Ruth looked between them, saw Catherine's anguish, saw the children's terror, saw the family she'd disrupted. "I have work now," Ruth said quietly. "A family in town. They need help. I can keep her. I can give her a home. I'm her mother." The last 3 words hung like a judge's gavel. Sheriff Garrett arrived minutes later, as if summoned by crisis itself. He looked at Ruth, looked at Hope in the cradle, looked at Daniel. "Baby belongs with her blood mother," he said. "Not unkindly. Unless there's evidence of unfitness." He examined Ruth. She was thin but clean, sober. Her eyes were clear, desperate, but clear. "I don't see unfitness," Garrett said. "I see a young mother who made a hard choice and came back when she could." "Please," Emma said. She tugged on the sheriff's coat. "Please don't take Hope. She's ours. We love her." Garrett's face softened, but his voice stayed firm. "Love doesn't change the law. Honey." Catherine moved like a woman in a dream. She went to the cradle, lifted Hope. The baby stirred, made a small sound of contentment, settled against Catherine's shoulder. "Every 2 hours, she still needs feeding," Catherine said. Her voice was mechanical. "Dead. She likes to be sung to. Her favorite song is..." Her voice broke completely. She carried Hope to Ruth, placed the baby in her arms. Ruth held her daughter awkwardly, unpracticed, but with fierce determination. "Thank you," Ruth whispered. "Thank you for keeping her alive." Catherine made a sound grief torn raw. She turned and ran from the cabin. Daniel stood frozen. Watched Ruth wrap Hope in a blanket. Watched the sheriff nod approval. Watched his children cry. Watched everything they'd built dissolve like spring snow. He should stop this. Should argue. Should do something. But what? What right did he have? Hope wasn't his daughter. Catherine wasn't his wife. They were just people who'd fallen into temporary grace. Now grace was ending. Ruth paused at the door. Looked back. The note was true. You are a good father. Then she left. Hope in her arms, walking into the sleet. The door closed. Silence crashed down. Emma crumpled to the floor, sobbing. Thomas sat by the empty cradle, face blank with shock. Jacob clung to Daniel's leg, crying, "Calf win, calf win!" Daniel picked him up, held him, had no comfort to offer. That night was the longest of Daniel's life. Catherine didn't return. He left food on her porch, it sat untouched. He knocked on her door, no answer. He called her name, silence. His children were ghosts. Emma lay in the sewing room, clutching the blanket Hope had used. Thomas wouldn't speak. Jacob asked for calf win baby until he cried himself to sleep. Daniel sat by the empty cradle and faced the truth. He'd failed. Failed to protect them from loss. Failed to act when it mattered. Failed to claim what he loved before it was too late. Just like he'd failed Sarah. The pattern repeated. Loss and failure. Loss and failure. Over and over. Maybe he wasn't meant for happiness. Maybe survival was all he got. The fire burned low. The cabin grew cold, outside. Winter settled back in, patient and cruel. 3 days. Catherine stayed in her cabin, invisible, unreachable. Daniel left food on her porch each morning, bread, stew, coffee. By evening it sat untouched, frozen. He knocked, called through the door, heard nothing. His children moved through the cabin like shadows. No laughter, no play. Emma's eyes were perpetually red. Thomas carved his wooden horse over and over, whittling it down to nothing. Jacob sat by the window, asking for Catherine in his broken toddler words. Daniel couldn't fix this, couldn't fix anything. The weight of his failure pressed down until he could barely breathe. He sat by the empty cradle, ran his hand over the carved star, remembered Sarah's smile when he'd shown her the design, remembered her death, remembered standing helpless then, just as he was helpless now. "Daddy!" Emma stood in the doorway, 7 years old enough to understand loss, young enough to still believe it could be fought. "Are you going to let Miss Catherine be alone?" she asked. "She wants to be alone." "No." Emma's voice was firm. "She thinks she has to be alone, like you did after Mama died." The observation struck home, sharp and true. "You stopped smiling for a whole year." Emma continued. "You stopped singing to us. You just did chores and went to bed. You were here, but you weren't really here." She moved closer. "Then Miss Catherine came, and you came back." Daniel's throat tightened. Out of the mouths of children, Thomas appeared beside his sister. "Hope saved us. Daddy, you said so. But maybe," he hesitated, "maybe we're supposed to save Miss Catherine too." The simplicity of it broke something open in Daniel's chest. Hope hadn't been the miracle. Hope had been the revelation, the gift that showed them they could still love, still risk, still open their hearts despite the cost. Catherine had crossed the snow Christmas morning, had saved them all, again and again, every day since. Now she was drowning in grief, and he was letting her, just like he'd let himself drown after Sarah died. "Your mother told me something once," Daniel said slowly. "She said love isn't about avoiding pain. It's about choosing to feel it anyway, choosing to be brave even when you're afraid." "So be brave," Emma said. "Go get her." Daniel stood, looked at his 3 children, saw Sarah in Emma's determined eyes, saw his own stubbornness in Thomas's quiet resolve, saw pure hope in Jacob's upturned face. "All right," he said. "I will." He put on his coat, stepped out into the March cold. The path between cabins was worn deep. Catherine had walked it hundreds of times over 3 months. Now Daniel walked it, climbed her steps, raised his fist, knocked. Silence. He knocked again. "Catherine, I know you can hear me. More silence. Then, faintly, go away. Daniel. No, ma'am. I'm done with going away. Done with shutting doors and locking rooms and pretending I don't feel things. He leaned against the door. I love you. My children love you, and I'm not asking anymore. I'm begging. Will you marry me? Long silence. Wind cut across the yard. Snow hissed against the windows. Then the door opened. Catherine stood there, wrecked, eyes swollen, hair loose, wearing grief like a physical weight. She looked at him with such devastation it hurt. Daniel, I couldn't save her. You saved us, he said. Now let us save you back. She shook her head. I'm broken. I told you I can't have children. I can't. You have 3 children. Daniel interrupted. Emma, Thomas, and Jacob. They're yours if you want them. They've been yours since Christmas morning. I'm not their mother. Yes, you are. Maybe not by birth, but by every other measure that matters. He stepped closer. And I'm asking you to be my wife, not because I need help, not because you're convenient, but because I choose you. Because 3 months ago you crossed the snow to save a dying baby, and you've been saving all of us every day since... Catherine's tears fell freely now. What if I fail? What if I'm not enough? Then we fail together. Then we pick up and try again. He took her hands. That's what families do. They choose each other, over and over, until it sticks. She looked past him to his cabin, saw 3 small faces pressed to the window. Emma, Thomas, Jacob, all watching, all hoping. They need you, Daniel said. I need you. I need you too, Catherine whispered. I have for so long, but I'm so afraid. So am I. But I'm more afraid of living without you. She looked at him then. Really looked. Saw past his words to the truth beneath. He was as broken as she was, as scared, as uncertain. But he was here, asking anyway, choosing anyway. Yes, she said. Her voice was barely audible. Yes, I'll marry you. Daniel pulled her close. She came into his arms and wept against his chest, not grief this time, but release, the terror of letting go, the terror of holding on, both at once, across the yard. The cabin door burst open. 3 children tumbled out into the snow, running, calling Catherine's name. She pulled back, wiped her eyes, managed a trembling smile. I should go, Daniel said. They're waiting. She ran to them. Emma hit her first, throwing arms around Catherine's waist. Thomas grabbed her hand. Jacob wrapped himself around her leg, and Catherine knelt in the snow, gathering all 3 close, holding them like she'd never let go. Daniel watched from Catherine's porch, watched his family reunite, watched hope return to faces that had been hollow with loss. The wind shifted, carried the scent of thaw beneath the cold. Spring was coming, real spring this time, and they would meet it together. March gave way to April. The snow retreated grudgingly, revealing winter-dead grass and hard earth. Catherine moved her belongings to Daniel's cabin officially. Took Sarah's sewing room without hesitation this time. The children bloomed under her continued presence. Emma chattered constantly, making plans for the garden. Thomas showed Catherine his secret places: a hollow tree, a rock shaped like a bear, the creek bend where minnows gathered. Jacob followed her everywhere, a small shadow that made her smile. Daniel courted her properly. It felt strange. Courtship inside their already established household. But important. He wanted to honor what they were building. He brought her the first robin's egg, pale blue and perfect. She set it on the windowsill, laughed at his formality, kissed his cheek. He carved her a wooden thimble. She used it every evening, mending by the fire while he whittled. They walked in the evenings after the children slept, talked about everything past sorrows, future hopes, the daily minutiae of life, learned each other's rhythms, learned each other's silences. I'm afraid sometimes, Catherine admitted one night, that I'll wake up and this will be gone. Me too, Daniel said, but we're both awake, and it's still here. By late April, the garden plot was ready. They worked it together, turning earth, pulling rocks. Emma and Thomas helped plant seeds. Jacob mostly scattered dirt and laughed. One afternoon, Catherine sat back on her heels, wiped her forehead. Daniel saw her hand tremble. You all right? Just tired. But her smile was strange. Secret. That evening after supper, she pulled him aside. The children were occupied, Emma teaching Thomas a song, Jacob playing with his blocks. I need to tell you something, Catherine said. Her voice shook, not with fear, with wonder. Daniel's heart jumped. What? She took his hand, placed it on her belly, held it there. I'm pregnant. Daniel. The doctor was wrong. Or maybe grief had broken something that healed. I don't know, but I'm pregnant, due in December. The world stopped, tilted, reformed. Are you certain? I've carried 3 babies to term for other women. I know the signs. Tears slipped down her face. I thought God had decided I didn't deserve. Daniel pulled her close. His own eyes were wet. When how long? 2 months. Maybe I wasn't sure at first. Didn't want to hope. But now, she laughed, the sound breaking. December. A Christmas baby. Emma's voice cut through. Mama, why are you crying? They both froze. Catherine looked at Daniel. Stricken. Emma had called her Mama. First time. Clear and certain. Catherine knelt. Come here, sweetheart. Emma approached, Thomas and Jacob following. All 3 looked concerned. I'm crying because I'm happy, Catherine said. Very, very happy. Why? Thomas asked. Daniel knelt beside Catherine. This moment mattered. How they handled it would shape everything that followed. Because Catherine said yes, he told his children, she's going to marry me. She's going to be your mother. Really, truly. Emma's face lit like sunrise. Forever. Forever, Catherine confirmed. And Daniel glanced at Catherine. She nodded. And we're going to have a baby. In December. For a heartbeat. Silence. Then Emma shrieked with joy. Thomas whooped. Jacob started jumping, not entirely sure why, but caught in the excitement. They piled onto Catherine and Daniel in a tangle of arms and laughter and questions. Will it be a boy? A girl? Can we name it? When's the wedding? Can I wear a flower crown? Daniel looked at Catherine over the children's heads. Saw joy there. Real. Unfettered joy. Not shadowed by fear. Not qualified by caution. Just pure, radiant happiness. We should do it soon, he said. The wedding. How soon? This week, Catherine laughed. That's very soon. I've waited long enough, Daniel said. 2 years, 3 months, however you count it, I'm done waiting. Then yes, Catherine said. This week. They married on a Saturday. The preacher came to the cabin. Sheriff Garrett stood witness. A handful of neighbors gathered Mrs. Jameson from the general store, the blacksmith and his wife. Even Mrs. Carson, who'd gossiped months before but brought a cake as apology. Catherine wore a simple dress, pale gray, with wildflowers in her hair that Emma had picked. Daniel wore his one good shirt, freshly laundered. The children stood beside them, Emma holding flowers, Thomas carefully holding the rings. Jacob standing as still as a 2-year-old could manage. Do you, Daniel Thorne, take Catherine Hayes? I do, He couldn't wait for the full question. Catherine laughed, tears streaming. I haven't said yes yet. Do you? I do. The preacher smiled. Well then, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Daniel kissed her. The children cheered. Garrett clapped. Mrs. Jameson dabbed her eyes. The dinner after was simple but joyful. Neighbors brought food. The children ran wild. Daniel held Catherine's hand under the table and couldn't stop smiling. Later, after everyone left and the children finally slept, Daniel and Catherine stood on the porch. Stars spread vast overhead. Spring peepers sang from the creek. I have something to tell you, Catherine said softly. Daniel tensed. What? I'm terrified. Of what? Everything? The baby? Being a mother to 4 children? Being a wife? Failing at all of it? She looked up at him. But I'm also happier than I've ever been. Both at once. Me too, Daniel admitted. Terrified and happy. I think that's how it's supposed to be. Is it? Sarah told me once love isn't the absence of fear. It's the presence of courage. He pulled Catherine close. We're both being brave. That's enough. She leaned into him. His hand rested on her belly where their child grew. Impossible gift. Unexpected grace. Inside the cabin, his children, their children slept safe and warm. Outside, spring continued its work. Thawing, growing, becoming. They stood together in the dark. 2 broken people made whole by choice and courage and love. The cradle waited inside. Not empty, never empty again. Ready. December came with heavy snow. Daniel stood at the window, watching white fall thick and fast, and remembered another December morning. Another snowfall. A basket on his porch. 1 year. It felt like a lifetime. Behind him, Catherine moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, even with her belly full and round. Emma helped flip flapjacks. Thomas set the table. Jacob tried to steal bacon and got his hand gently slapped. Their family, complete and chaotic and perfect. Catherine went into labor 3 weeks before Christmas. The midwife came from town, sent Emma and Thomas to the neighbors, left Jacob with Daniel. He held his youngest son, pacing, listening to Catherine's labored breathing from the bedroom. Calf win? Jacob asked. Mama's fine, Daniel said. The word came naturally now. Mama. Hours passed, long and anxious. Daniel remembered Sarah's labor with Jacob, remembered the blood, the terror, the ending, then a baby's cry, sharp and strong. The midwife emerged, smiling. Healthy boy, and a healthy mother. Daniel's knees nearly buckled with relief. He carried Jacob into the bedroom. Catherine lay exhausted but glowing, a tiny bundle in her arms. She looked up at Daniel and smiled. Come meet your son, she said. Daniel sat beside her. Looked down at the baby, red-faced, squalling, absolutely perfect. He's beautiful. His name is Michael. Catherine said, after my father, if that's all right. It's perfect. Jacob peered at his new brother. Baby, he announced. Calf win, baby. Catherine laughed, tired but joyful. Yes, sweet boy, Catherine's baby. The other children returned home that evening, tumbling in with snow on their coats and excitement in their eyes. They crowded around the bed, careful but eager. He's so small, Emma breathed. You were that small once, Daniel told her. Can I hold him? Thomas asked. Catherine showed him how. Thomas sat very still, cradling Michael with fierce concentration. The baby's tiny hand wrapped around Thomas's finger. He likes me, Thomas whispered. Of course he does, Catherine said. You're his big brother. That night, after the children finally slept, Daniel sat beside Catherine's bed. She nursed Michael, the baby making small, contented sounds. We did it, Catherine said softly. Did what? Made room. That's what Hope's note said. You made room for 4. Now we have 5. Daniel thought about it, counted. Emma, Thomas, Jacob, Michael, that's 4 children. And Hope, Catherine said. She's not here, but she's still part of this, part of us. Daniel nodded. She was right. Hope had changed everything, had shown them how to love again, how to risk again. Christmas morning came bright and cold. The children woke early, tumbling into the main room where stockings hung. Even baby Michael, 3 weeks old now, was awake and alert. They were opening gifts, simple things, handmade when someone knocked. Daniel opened the door to a young woman holding a toddler. It took him a moment to recognize Ruth. She'd filled out, looked healthier, and the child in her arms, blonde curls, bright eyes, round cheeks, was clearly Hope. I'm sorry to intrude, Ruth said, but I wanted to say thank you. It's been a year since, she gestured vaguely, since you saved her. I thought she should know the people who loved her first. Catherine appeared behind Daniel, Michael in her arms, for a moment. The two mothers looked at each other. Then Catherine smiled. Come in, she said. Please. They shared Christmas dinner, an unlikely gathering. Ruth told them about her life, the family she worked for, how Hope was thriving. Hope sat in Emma's lap, babbling and playing with a rag doll. She's beautiful, Catherine said. Because of you. Ruth answered. You kept her alive, gave me time to become a mother. After they ate. Ruth prepared to leave. Hope had fallen asleep against Thomas's shoulder. He carefully transferred her to Ruth's arms. Thank you, Ruth said again. For everything. For loving her when I couldn't. We still do, Emma said simply. Ruth smiled, kissed her daughter's head. I know, and she'll know. I'll make sure she knows. After they left, Daniel stood on the porch with Catherine. The sun was setting, painting the snow gold and pink. Inside, the children played 4 voices laughing, the baby occasionally joining in. 4 became 5, Catherine said, just like the note promised. Daniel thought about it. No, he said slowly. Broken became whole. That's what really happened. Catherine leaned against him. His arm came around her shoulders. They watched the day fade, the stars begin to emerge. Do you remember what you said that morning? Catherine asked. When you found Hope? I said a lot of things. You said you couldn't take on another child, that you were barely holding together. She looked up at him. But you did anyway. Took her in, made room. We both did. Yes, Catherine agreed. We both did. Inside. Emma started singing a Christmas carol. Thomas joined in. Jacob's voice added its off-key contribution. And underneath it all, baby Michael's small sounds, contented, safe, loved, their family. Built from loss and choice, from courage and grace. From one Christmas morning when someone left a baby in the snow and 2 broken people decided to be whole. Merry Christmas, Daniel said. Catherine kissed him. Merry Christmas. The snow fell soft. The cabin glowed warm against the dark, and inside, love made room for grief and joy, for past and future, for all the ways a family could be. Hope had saved them. Not the baby, but the thing she represented, the willingness to risk, to open, to make room in a crowded heart for one more, always room for one more.